That what you're saying?
You heard what the hell I said. He had 8 games where he had single-digit shot attempts.
If Nikola Jokic wins the MVP, he's the worst player to win the MVP since Dave Cowan.
And by the way, I think that's why we're likely about to have a 3-time MVP. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in the league.
When it comes to MVP voting, 80% of the voters are white American. 20% are other.
Nikola Jokic is a frontrunner for the regular season Most Valuable Player award this year. While this shows how much the Joker is ahead of the competition, making the MVP award his monopoly, it also causes voters fatigue and starts to make some people jealous. Jealous that they couldn't achieve what a non-athletic, slow big man makes look easy. That feeling of jealousy has caused some of them to say some outrageous things about Nikola, most notably ex-NBA player Kendrick Perkins, who is now an analyst for ESPN. Let's see what Perkins and some other NBA analysts and players have said about Jokic, and if it actually makes some sense to think such stuff. Let's start by hearing what Kendrick Perkins actually had to say. I just want to know, what songs are we dancing to? So when I say this, I ask, what is the criteria for the MVP and how the goalposters move? I am asking these questions for a reason. When it comes down to guys winning MVPs since 1990, it's only 3 guys that won the MVP that weren't top 10 in scoring. Do you know who those 3 guys were? Steve Nash, Jokic, and Dirk Nowitzki. What do those guys have in common? I'll let it sit there and marinate. You think about it. They are all white. He didn't want to come out and say it, but we all understood what he tried to say. Perkins holds a preference for the eye test over advanced statistics. Redick, a member of the First Take team, eagerly engaged in a spirited debate against Perkins' contrary views, effectively countering with a combination of statistical and eye test arguments. Redick aptly pointed out, I understand you're not a fan of advanced stats, but I want to bring in a few statistics here. I need to respond because I didn't catch this earlier. The notion that a player's teammates take good or bad shots, well, we can actually measure which players create high-quality shooting opportunities for their teammates, and Nikola Jokic ranks in the top 5 for creating shot opportunities of high quality. When you watch them play, which I know you do, Redick continued, when Jokic decides whether to take a shot or make a play, he's making a read, because that's what skilled basketball players do, so when he gets double-teamed, he kicks it out. When he sees help coming too soon, he swings it to the corner for an open 3. It's a smart pass, creating the most efficient 3-point shot in basketball. Perkins countered assertively, expressing uncertainty about the MVP criteria and how people assess players, be it based on team records, advanced stats, the eye test, or any other factor for that matter. Another NBA analyst with doubts about Nikola Jokic's MVP award is Nick Wright, a dedicated LeBron James fan. Known for his unconventional takes in NBA media, he didn't hold back on this one either. The MVP ceremony should be held in some back room somewhere because he's not playing that great in round 2. When you glance at the list of MVPs throughout league history, I say this with all due respect to Nikola, but he would rank as one of the weakest MVPs in the last 35 years. Chris Paul, on the other hand, wouldn't fall into that category because he's an all-time great player. Nick continued, while Nikola Jokic is just a good player having a good season. Nick Wright clarifies that he doesn't consider himself a Nikola Jokic hater, stating, when I made this statement 2 years ago, I was labeled a Nikola Jokic hater. But it turns out I was correct. I declared that I had Nikola Jokic as the second in the MVP race, behind Chris Paul. I was criticized as a hater, yet Chris Paul's team swept him in the playoffs. The second argument doesn't even hold water. People need to understand that the NBA Most Valuable Player award is solely for the regular season. It's based on what a player demonstrates in the 82 games leading up to the playoffs, not during the postseason. Despite being swept that year, Nikola Jokic performed exceptionally well in the series against the Suns, averaging 25 points, 13.3 rebounds, and 5.8 assists, leading his Nuggets in these 3 statistical categories. Chris Paul's team defeating Nikola Jokic's Nuggets doesn't affect Paul's MVP race. Therefore, when someone like Nick Wright brings up playoff success and the regular season MVP in the same conversation, it's best to tune them out, as it's much simpler that way. However, be prepared. They'll keep arguing. Last year I was called a hater because I said there are 2 guys in the Western Conference carrying mediocre teams, Nick recalled, Jokic and Luka, and everybody was like, oh Nick, you're showing nepotism, you're biased, but I insisted, no, Luka is better. And Luka made it to the Western Conference Finals, Nick emphasized. Listen Jokic, if he hadn't won those 2 MVPs, he would be the front runner. Once more, let's say it together, playoff success doesn't factor into winning the regular season MVP. There's something called voter fatigue, and this situation exemplifies it. The regular season MVP should be awarded to the most valuable player of that season, regardless of whether they're receiving it for the first time or not. Max Kellerman of ESPN recently made a rather surprising statement. "I've never witnessed a disconnect like this, where a player monopolizes the MVP but barely makes my top 5. Following his statement, Kendrick Perkins, his ESPN colleague, chimed in by suggesting that Jokic needs to demonstrate playoff success to secure future MVP titles. It's rather absurd to claim that Jokic isn't among the top 5 players in the league, especially when he's leading his team to the #1 seed in the conference while consistently posting a triple-double. However, it's crucial to remember that the NBA regular season MVP award solely considers performance during the regular season, as its name implies. Let's address this myth as well. In the 2021 and 2022 playoffs, the Nuggets fell to the eventual champions, the Golden State Warriors. During this series, Jokic was surrounded by players who were far from being high producers. Monty Morris, who was averaging only 10 points per game for the struggling Washington Wizards' Will Barton, who was released by the same struggling Wizards' Austin Rivers, with an average of 5 points last season. Green, who was averaging just 6 points per game. Bones Highland, shooting at 39% from the field, and Bryn Forbes and DeMarcus Cousins. Draymond Green is renowned for his candidness in the NBA. As a devoted student of the game, you'll often find Draymond engrossed in videotapes of players from across the league, observing intricacies that often elude others. During one Nuggets game, Draymond keenly observed some defensive lapses by Jokic in the first half. At halftime of a Nuggets game, Draymond recalled, "I had 4 clips, and I focused on Jokic's defense. I was thinking, if they ever want to be a good team, he's the linchpin of their defense. He needs to step up defensively." Draymond didn't mince words as he critiqued Jokic's defensive plays. He noted, "I presented 4 clips where he failed to rotate to the low man and seemed sluggish. I was pretty harsh in my assessment." Later on, Draymond mentioned that Jokic began incorporating those same defensive rotations. The following year, he approached me and said something like, "I saw what you said about my defense and you were right," or "I appreciate your feedback." He added, "I've improved." I told him, "You've undoubtedly improved. I've been observing you this year and you've made significant strides." Draymond reflected on this encounter, remarking, "It was a significant moment for me because this TV gig is relatively new. Looking ahead, it's clear that Draymond has the makings of a remarkable NBA analyst once his playing days are behind him. That much is certain." This is an example of how constructive criticism can do wonders in a player's performance. But there have been a couple of situations where trash-talking Nikola Jokic has proven as fuel for him as well. Russell Westbrook, Morris, and Dwight Howard have all tried to get into the Joker's head but ultimately failed. Trash-talking Nikola Jokic brings the same outcome as saying that the Joker's MVPs are won because of racist reasons. It makes you look dumb. Each of these 3 guys that have tried their luck against Jokic have gotten the best of him. Nikola Jokic is a pretty chill guy, unless you start provoking him. I guess the message has been spread, so that's why most players don't even try him anymore. It is just the analysts now. Nikola Jokic has undeniably established himself as one of the most dominant forces in the NBA, securing back-to-back regular season MVP awards. However, as the saying goes, familiarity can sometimes breed contempt, and it appears that voter fatigue may be setting in. The accolades and attention heaped upon the Serbian maestro have become so routine that they risk overshadowing the remarkable achievements of other MVP contenders. In the end, regardless of who ultimately claims the MVP title, one thing is certain: the contenders are eminently deserving of the accolade. They have graced the NBA with their extraordinary skills, passion, and dedication. And as fans, we should cherish every moment they spend on the court. The MVP race is a celebration of the sport's excellence, and as spectators, we are privileged to bear witness to this golden era of basketball greatness. So let's revel in the competition, savor the performances, and appreciate these MVP candidates while they continue to dazzle us with their best.